Hi everyone. So, let's talk metrics. I know there is a lot of articles and videos about this theme, but I still get questions from founders about metrics and what metrics they should look at. And I decided, okay, let's talk about it in normal words. First of all, if you don't know your numbers, you have no way of knowing whether your business is doing well or is already bankrupt. You need to think, what is your next milestone and what do you need to do to get there? It's not just about numbers, but about milestones, about your product and your customers. You don't know what's working or not if you do not know your numbers. Tracking your metrics should help guide you in regular decision making. And don't forget about reporting to investors or securing great business partnerships. Of course, metrics will help you in attracting and justifying new funding. Uh, how much you really need for the nearest year and a half or 2 years, and why do you need this money? And surely PR and attention, it's like it's easier to communicate everything in metrics and gaining this attention that is essential for any startup. It is true that metrics can be dangerous, especially if you are getting lost on focusing on the wrong metrics, or if you have internal vision on lower level metrics without regard to the end result and bigger picture. Still, the metrics are critical to watch. What gets measured gets improved. Just remember it. I'm going to talk about basic essential metrics, but if you don't have a product at all at this moment, just don't waste your time. You need to build your MVP first, so you will start to show it to the world, to your customers, and then get your metrics in line. These metrics make sense if you have any customers. Okay, so first one, customer acquisition cost. It means how much does it cost your business to acquire a new customer? It sounds important, right? Without this information, you really don't know if your business model is sustainable or if you really have an actual business model. You certainly don't know how profitable each customer is for your company. Most companies sadly have little idea of what is truly cost them to acquire a customer. This is likely one of the reasons that so many fail and go bankrupt. And it's especially true in startups and among first-time entrepreneurs. Well, there can be many numbers involved in your total customer acquisition cost. There are probably both static overhead figures to be alive to serve customers, and also variable expenses involved in securing and servicing each new customer. Your upfront cost per lead or cost per action is not your total customer acquisition cost. Sorry. You might get clicks from an ad to your website for $1 per piece. Though, between all of the creative work, lead hanging, and conversion rates, the lead might still end up costing you 300 or 700 by the time they become paying customer. And they actually put cash in your bank account. That's a huge difference, right? You can't work the rest of your numbers accurately, have a workable budget, or stay in business long without knowing those figures. Just open your eyes, calculate exactly What is your customer acquisition cost? Okay, next one. Customer retention rate. This can also be expressed as your customer churn rate. I know many startups who just forget about this churn rate. Please don't forget about this. It's like essential metric. This is all about understanding how long your customers stick around after you acquire them. It is critical for accurately stating your other financial metrics and for accurate financial forecasting and modeling. This is becoming even more important as more startups have come to rely on recurring revenue and utilize lifetime customer value to justify their expenses and grow fast. So, does your average customer stick with you for 1 month, 6 months, 30 years, for multiple generations? You need to calculate this customer retention rate. As you can see the formula. So how do you calculate customer retention rate? To determine your retention rate, first identify the time frame you want to study. Next, collect the number of existing customers at the start of the time period. Then find the number of total customers at the end of the time period. Finally, determine the number of new customers added within the time period. So, again, start with the number of customers at the end of the time period. If you are measuring retention for the calendar year, E is the number of customers you have on December 31st. Next stage, subtract the number of new customers gained within the time period. And remember, you don't want new customers throwing off your data, so subtract all customers you acquired in the past year from E. Okay? I hope you understand that. Divide the result by the number of customers at the beginning of the time period, S. In this case, S would be the number of customers on January 1st of the previous year and multiply by 100. Okay, so lifetime customer value. It's next metrics we're gonna talk about. This is where your customer acquisitions, customer retention rates, and recurring revenue all come together. This is where you figure out how much a customer is really worth, as well as what you can reasonably afford to pay to acquire a customer. Even if you and your investors are happy taking losses up front to buy up market share and subsidize prices to gain traction, the great news here is that lifetime customer value is also typically far higher than most immediately estimate. At least it can be. In many cases, if served well, customers should become lifetime customers. In fact, they should become brand ambassadors and lead sources, and they can provide exponential growth. They should become multi-generational customers, right? Easy examples of this may be seen in insurance, real estate, and the food and beverage industry. So, customer acquisition and customer value, it's very important for your startup. So, firstly, you'll need a sense of your average customer lifespan. This figure is usually expressed in years, though products with higher churn rate may prefer to measure it in months. It's okay. Determining customer value requires a bit more math. Sorry about that. In calculation for customer value is Average purchase frequency times average purchase value. Average purchase frequency is the mean number of times a customer spends money on or within your product over the course of a predetermined time period. Average purchase value is the mean monetary cost of these purchases over that same time period. Take customers who buy from your hypothetical e-commerce website. The average customer makes 100 purchases a year, with each purchase clocking in at $10 transaction. This means your customer value is $1,000. Your most dedicated customers have been purchasing from your business since inception and 10 years ago. At $1,000 a year, their CLV is $10,000 and growing. On average, however, customers tend to churn after 3 years, making your average is about 3,000. Okay, profit margins. Next metric we're gonna talk about. Profit margins are very important, perhaps even more so than the dollar amount of profit you are realizing at any one moment in time. There are many variations of this metric depending on whether you are counting gross or net profits and exactly how you are counting your revenues and costs into this metric. Just understand that it is a pivotal metric for your venture. Firstly, if your predicted profit margins in your pitch deck are complete guesswork and unrealistic, you are going to blow your chances of getting funded. Nothing else you worked so hard on your deck may matter. This one number can cost you all of your credibility. Secondly, profit margins are great for benchmarking. While trying to compete on price alone typically isn't the wisest strategy, it can be a powerful differentiator. Not only for customers, but for investors, potential hires, and acquirers. Your profit margin need to be large enough to give you a cushion, competitiveness, and scalability. So, when assessing the profitability of a company, there are three primary margin ratios to consider: gross, operating, and net. You can see a breakdown of each profit margin formula here. You may be asking yourself, what is a good profit margin? A good margin will vary considerably by industry, of course, but as a general rule of thumb, it's 10% net profit margin is considered average. And 20% margin is considered high or good, and 5% margin is low. Again, their guidelines vary widely by industry and company size and can be impacted by a variety of other factors. But you should know, calculate, and understand your profit margin. Next one is growth rate. Your rate of growth is incredibly influential. It can make a big difference in gaining attention across everyone you want to reach. It certainly makes a huge difference when it comes on fundraising. It can be a substantial factor in M&A deals and so on. Ultimately, it will impact your stock price and value. So it's important stuff. Especially in early stage startups, you can have your pick of what you count as your primary gauge of growth. You may be focusing on customer count, market share, revenues, or profits. Just make sure you pick one that you can focus on and excel in. Okay, next one is burn rate. How much cash is your startup burning through every month? Your burn rate tells you how much you are spending to stay in business, as well as how much capital you'll need to keep you in business. Not only until your break-even point or next round, but in crisis moments too. You need to be, well, a bit prepared for longer funding period, for some moments that we can see right now within this crisis, this year crisis. So your capital divided by your burn rate is how much longer you can afford to stay in business. It also called your runway. A company's burn rate is also used as a measuring stick for its runway, the amount of time the company has before it runs out of money. So, for example, if a company has 1 million in the bank and it spends 100,000 a month, its burn rate would be 100,000 and its runway would be 10 months. There are two types of burn rate: net burn and gross burn. The company's gross burn is the total amount of operating costs it incurs in expenses each month. The company's net burn is the total amount of money a company loses each month. So, if a technology startup spends 5,000 monthly on office space, 10,000 on monthly server costs, and 15,000 on salaries and wages for its engineers, its gross burn rate would be 30,000. However, if the company has already producing revenue, its net burn would be different. Even if the company operates at a loss, with revenues of 20,000 a month and costs of goods sold of 10,000, it would still work to reduce its overall burn. In this scenario, the company's net burn would be 20,000. So, I recommend you calculate it monthly. It's important, and understand how long you're gonna be in business if you will continue to do so. Okay, so next one metrics is NPS. NPS stands for Net Promoter Score. Put simply, your NPS is a measure of customer experience and a predictor of future business growth. For those new to these metrics, it's like online reviews. It is how much your customers love you and will refer others to you. This can have direct, tangible value for your business. It will show you if you are getting it right, or despite other recent positive metrics, you may actually be headed out of business pretty soon. If there is one number that predicts the future for your company, this is probably it, providing you can afford to keep it up. So, calculate your Net Promoter Scores using the answer to a single question, using a 0 to 10 scale. How likely is it that you would recommend brand to a friend or colleague? This is called the Net Promoter Score question or the recommend question. Responders are grouped as follows. Promoters, scored 9, 10, are loyal enthusiasts who will keep buying and refer others, fueling growth. Passive, score 7 to 8, are satisfied but unenthusiastic customers who are vulnerable to competitive offerings. And detractors, score 0 to 6, are unhappy customers who can damage your brand and impede growth through negative word of mouth. Subtracting the percentage of detractors from the percentage of promoters yields the net promoting score, which can range from a low of -100 of every customer is a detractor to a high of 100 if Every customer is a promoter. So here you can see the details. It's important to calculate this metric from time to time to touch the water to understand, are you doing it right? If not, you need to take some actions. Okay, and last one metrics we're gonna talk about today is overhead costs. How much are your static overhead expenses? These directly relate to your burn rate and profit margins. They dictate how much it costs to keep operating as you have been. They may also dictate your ability to scale up, to take advantage of the market, or even if you're gonna be on the market at all. Static overhead costs can be dangerous, and they are dangerous. They can sink you faster than concrete boots. They are harder to shake off. This can be an office space, heavy static salaries, and other business practices and tools. Be careful with your overhead costs. Understand why you are paying this and how you can manage it. It's easy to get caught up in considering every metric, but don't. This is counterproductive. Take time to identify your business model and only measure the key metrics reflect the performance of your startup. What you are looking for are metrics that are diagnostic in respect of the current state of your startup or predictors of the future. Focus on big picture, milestones, so you will never be captured in tunnel vision. Thank you for your time and attention, and good luck!